Thanks for joining me on this heartfelt journey. Don't forget to subscribe and like for more stories that touch the soul.
The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under my studio door like a whispered secret. My hands trembled as I read the lawyer's words. Dad had owned property I'd never known about, a warehouse space downtown. The keys were mine now. I pressed my palm against the cool glass of my studio window, watching fog roll across Moonrise Bay's harbor. 3 months since the funeral, and Dad was still surprising me. The September air carried the scent of salt and dying summer, matching the hollow ache in my chest. My phone buzzed. Marcus's name lit up the screen. "Elena, you sound distracted." His voice was warm honey, the way it always was when he worried about me. "The gallery opening is next week. Are you ready?" I stared at my easel, where a half-finished painting of the coastline mocked me with its incomplete horizon. Nothing felt ready anymore. Not since Dad died. Not since Mom started forgetting my name some days. "I need to check something first," I said, pocketing the warehouse keys. See, the drive through Moonrise Bay's narrow streets felt like traveling through watercolors. Victorian houses blurred past in shades of sage and lavender, their gingerbread trim weathered by decades of ocean storms. This town had been my whole world for 35 years. Yet somehow I'd never noticed Dad driving to the industrial district near the docks. The warehouse squatted between a fish processing plant and an abandoned cannery. Its red brick facade was streaked with rust stains that looked like dried tears. The lock turned easily, as if it had been waiting for me. Inside, dusty sunlight filtered through high windows, illuminating an artist's paradise. Canvases lined the walls, floor to ceiling. Easels stood like sentinels throughout the space. The air smelled of turpentine and secrets. Dad had been a painter. My father, who'd worked construction for 40 years, who'd come home every night with calloused hands and concrete dust in his hair, had been creating art in secret. I moved through the space like a sleepwalker, touching brush handles worn smooth by familiar fingers. The paintings were extraordinary, landscapes that captured the soul of Moonrise Bay. Portraits of Mom from decades ago, her face luminous with youth and love. And then, in the far corner, I found them. Paintings of a woman I didn't recognize. Dark hair, olive skin, eyes that held the same melancholy I saw in my own mirror. She appeared in canvas after canvas, sometimes laughing, sometimes weeping, always beautiful, always looking at the viewer with desperate longing. My chest tightened. The woman wasn't Mom. These weren't family portraits. I heard footsteps behind me. Carmen's voice echoed through the space. "Elena, your mom said you'd be here. She's asking for you." I turned to find my best friend standing in the doorway, her social worker instincts reading the chaos in my expression. Carmen had been Mom's caseworker when the dementia diagnosis came. She'd become my anchor in the storm of medical appointments and memory loss. "Look at this," I whispered, gesturing to the mystery woman's portraits. Carmen approached slowly, her trained eye taking in details I'd missed. "Elena, these are dated. Look." She pointed to small numerals in the corner of each canvas. "This one's from 1988. This one's 1989, the year before I was born. The year my parents' marriage had supposedly been perfect." "There's more." Carmen had moved to a desk in the corner, where sketches lay scattered like fallen leaves. Love letters. They're signed R. My hand shook as I read the flowing script. Passionate words. Promises of forever. Plans to leave Moonrise Bay together. "Elena." Carmen's voice was gentle. "There's something else." She held up a birth certificate. Not mine. A child born in 1989 to Roberto Vasquez and Rosa Martinez. A daughter named Isabella. The warehouse walls seemed to close in. My father had another child. Somewhere out there, I had a sister I'd never known existed. I sank onto a paint-stained stool, the weight of discovery crushing my lungs. Everything I'd believed about my family was a lie. Dad hadn't been the devoted husband I'd idolized. Mom hadn't been his only love. "I need to get home," I managed. "Mom needs to know I found this." But as I stood to leave, one more painting caught my eye. hidden behind the others as if Dad had been afraid to display it. The mystery woman again, but this time, she wasn't alone. She was holding a baby. A baby with my father's eyes and my mother's smile. I found something that changed everything. The baby in the painting had my face. I stared at the canvas until my eyes burned, searching for any detail that might prove me wrong. But the resemblance was unmistakable. The same stubborn chin, the same high cheekbones, the same dark eyes that had stared back at me from mirrors my entire life. Carmen placed a steadying hand on my shoulder.
Elena, we need to think about this carefully.
But thinking was impossible. My mind reeled with questions that had no answers. If this woman Rosa was my birth mother, then who was Sophia? The woman who'd raised me, who'd taught me to paint, who'd held me through every scraped knee and broken heart? The drive home passed in a blur of eucalyptus trees and salt air. Moonrise Bay's familiar landmarks felt foreign now, as if I was seeing them through different eyes. Every memory of my childhood seemed tainted by this new knowledge. I found Mom in her garden, tending to the roses Dad had planted for their 20th anniversary. Her silver hair caught the afternoon sunlight, and for a moment, she looked exactly like the woman in Dad's early paintings. The woman I'd always believed was my mother. "Mia," she said, smiling up at me, "you're home early." The Spanish endearment hit me like a physical blow. Had she always called me that? I'd never questioned it before, never wondered why she used her native language when English had always been our household tongue. It is many international Mom, I need to ask you something. She continued pruning, her movements careful and precise. Of course, Elena, what is it? I found Dad's studio today, the warehouse downtown. Her hands stilled on the rose stems. A thorn drew blood from her finger, but she didn't seem to notice. I see, she said quietly. There were paintings there of a woman named Rosa and letters. I sat beside her on the garden bench, the same one where she comforted me after my first heartbreak. Mom, who is Rosa Martinez? The silence stretched between us like an ocean. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the crash of waves against the cliffs, the eternal rhythm that had soundtracked my entire life. When Mom finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Rosa was your father's first wife. The words hit me like a rogue wave. First wife? They were so young, 19 and 20. Roberta was working construction, trying to save money for college. Rosa was studying to be a teacher. Mom's fingers traced the edge of a rose petal. They loved each other desperately, the kind of love that burns so bright it consumes everything. I thought of the passion in Dad's paintings, the raw emotion that had bled through every brushstroke. What happened to her? She got pregnant, with you. Mom's eyes met mine, and I saw decades of carefully buried pain. But Rosa had dreams. She wanted to travel, to see the world. A baby didn't fit into those plans. My chest tightened. She left? She left when you were 6 months old. Just disappeared one night while Roberto was working late. Left you with him and never looked back. The garden spun around me. I gripped the bench until my knuckles went white. I met your father 3 months later, Mom continued. I was working at the community center teaching art classes. He would bring you to the children's programs. You were this beautiful, serious baby who would stare at the paintings on the walls like you were trying to decode them. A memory surfaced, hazy and incomplete, being very small, reaching for bright colors on a wall. Strong hands lifting me up to touch the canvas. A woman's voice saying, "She's going to be an artist, just like her papa." You raised me, I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth. I loved you from the moment I saw you. When Roberto and I married, I adopted you legally. You became mine in every way that mattered. Tears streamed down her face. I never wanted you to feel like you weren't wanted, Elena. Because you were. You were so wanted. I reached for her hand, feeling the familiar calluses from years of gardening. Why didn't you tell me? Your father wanted to, especially after you became an artist. He said you deserved to know where your talent came from, but I was scared. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, scared that if you knew the truth, you'd leave me too. The late afternoon sun painted the garden in shades of gold and amber. I sat with this woman who'd been my mother in every way that mattered, processing the revelation that my entire identity had been built on a foundation of love and lies. "Is she still alive?" I asked. "Rosa?" "I don't know. Roberto never tried to find her. He said she made her choice." But I could see in Mom's eyes that she knew more than she was saying. There was something else, another secret waiting to be unearthed. "Mom, what aren't you telling me?" She stood abruptly, gathering her gardening tools with shaking hands. "I'm tired, mija. This is enough for today." As she walked toward the house, I noticed something I'd missed before. The way she moved, the slight tremor in her hands. The dementia was progressing faster than we'd thought. "Mom, wait." She turned back, and for a moment I saw confusion in her eyes. "Elena, when did you get home?" My heart broke. The woman who'd raised me, who'd sacrificed her own dreams to give me a family, was disappearing into the fog of her own mind. Soon, she might not remember any of this conversation. The secrets she'd kept for 35 years might be lost forever. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the house settling around me. Everything I believed about myself had shifted, like sand reshaping itself after a storm. I was Elena Vasquez, but I was also the daughter of Rosa Martinez, a woman who'd chosen her dreams over her child. I thought about my own choices, my art, my relationship with Marcus, my decision to stay in Moonrise Bay when I could have gone anywhere. Had I inherited my mother's wanderlust, or had I learned to love roots from the woman who'd raised me? My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Thinking about you. Are you okay?" I started to type a response, then stopped. How could I explain that I wasn't sure who I was anymore? That the woman he'd fallen in love with might be built on a lie? Instead, I got up and pulled out my easel. In the silvery moonlight filtering through my studio window, I began to paint. Not the landscapes I usually preferred, but a portrait, a woman with dark hair and olive skin, holding a baby who looked exactly like me. As I worked, I felt something shift inside me. The painting wasn't just about Rosa or the secrets she'd left behind. It was about the space between knowing and not knowing, between the love that stays and the love that leaves. I painted until dawn, adding layers of color and emotion until the canvas pulsed with life. When I finally stepped back, I realized I'd created something extraordinary. Not just a painting, but a bridge between my past and my future. The doorbell rang as I was cleaning my brushes. I opened it to find David standing on my doorstep, looking uncomfortable in his expensive suit. "Elena, I heard about Dad's studio, about what you found." My older brother, who'd barely spoken to me since Dad's funeral, who'd built his life around avoiding our family's complications. "How did you hear?" "Mom called me. She's confused, Elena. She thinks Rosa's coming back." I couldn't believe who was behind it. David stepped into my studio without invitation, his lawyer's eyes scanning the paint-stained floors and canvases propped against every available surface. He'd always been uncomfortable with my art, as if creativity was a weakness he couldn't afford to acknowledge. "She called me at 3 in the morning, he said, loosening his tie. Mom was crying, saying she needed to clean the house because Rosa was coming home with the baby." I set down my brushes, feeling the weight of the night's painting session in my bones. The dementia is getting worse. It's not just that. David ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from our childhood, when he was trying to solve problems beyond his reach. "Elena, there's something else you need to know." He pulled out his phone, showing me a text message. "This arrived yesterday. The message was simple. I'm ready to come home. R." My blood turned to ice. "Rosa?" "I think so. The number's from San Francisco. I had my assistant run a trace." David's voice was clinical, detached. "There's a Rosa Martinez living in the Mission District. She's an art teacher at an elementary school." The room spun. After 35 years of silence, my birth mother was reaching out. But why now? Why after all this time? "Have you told Mom?"
Are you insane? She's already confused enough. Elena, we need to handle this carefully. This woman walked out on you once. She could destroy Mom if she shows up now. I thought about the paintings in Dad's studio, the raw emotion in every brushstroke. Maybe she had her reasons. What reasons could justify abandoning your baby? David's voice was sharp with old anger. Do you know what it was like? Watching Dad fall apart those first few months. Watching him try to be both parents while grieving a woman who didn't even have the decency to say goodbye. A memory surfaced from deep in my childhood. Being 5 years old, finding Dad crying in his workshop. I'd asked him why he was sad, and he'd said sometimes grown-ups cry when they miss someone. I'd assumed he was missing his own father who died the year before.
He painted her for decades, I said quietly. He never stopped loving her.
He loved the idea of her. The woman who left was selfish and cruel. David moved to the window, staring out at the harbor. And now she wants back in? After Dad's dead and can't protect you from her anymore? But I was remembering something else. A story Mom had told me once about a young woman who'd come to the community center asking about art classes. How she'd seemed lost, desperate. How she'd cried when she saw the children's paintings displayed on the walls. David, what if she didn't leave because she didn't love me? What if she left because she did? He turned from the window, his expression skeptical. That's a pretty story, Elena, but it doesn't change what happened. Maybe I should call her. Absolutely not. David's lawyer voice was back, authoritative and final. I'll handle this. I'll contact her, explain that Mom is sick and that you're not interested in a reunion. You can't make that decision for me. I can protect you from making a mistake you'll regret. I thought about the painting I'd just finished. The woman holding the baby with such tender desperation. What if I regret not trying? David's phone rang before he could answer. His expression shifted as he listened to the caller. That was my assistant, he said, hanging up. Rosa Martinez is already here. She's in Moonrise Bay. The news hit me like a physical blow. After 35 years, my birth mother had returned to the place where she'd left me. She was breathing the same salt air, walking the same streets, maybe even driving past the house where I'd grown up. Where is she staying? The Ocean View Inn. Elena, I really think we should— No. I was already reaching for my jacket. I'm going to see her. This is a terrible idea. It's my choice. David caught my arm as I headed for the door. What about Mom? What if she sees you with this woman? What if it confuses her even more? 8. I paused, thinking about the woman who'd raised me, who'd sacrificed her own dreams to give me a family. I'll be careful, but I can't live with not knowing. The drive to the Ocean View Inn took 15 minutes, but it felt like traveling through time. I passed the elementary school where I'd first learned to paint, the library where Mom had read me stories about brave princesses and magical kingdoms. Every landmark of my childhood seemed to whisper questions I'd never thought to ask. The inn perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, its weathered shingles and wraparound porch designed to capture the romance of coastal living. I'd painted it dozens of times, but I'd never imagined I'd be walking into its lobby to meet the woman who'd given birth to me. The desk clerk, a teenager with purple hair and multiple piercings, looked up from her phone. Can I help you? I'm looking for Rosa Martinez. She's a guest here. Room 12, but I think she's on the back porch. She's been sitting there all morning staring at the ocean. I walked through the inn's cozy interior, past antique furniture and faded photographs of Moonrise Bay's fishing fleet. The back porch stretched across the entire width of the building, offering an unobstructed view of the coastline. A woman sat alone at a small table, her dark hair streaked with silver, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup. She wore a flowing skirt and a peasant blouse, the kind of bohemian style I'd always been drawn to without understanding why. When she looked up, I saw my own eyes staring back at me. Elena. Her voice was soft, musical. You're even more beautiful than I imagined. I sat across from her, my heart pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. How did you know I'd come? I didn't, but I hoped. She reached across the table, then pulled her hand back. I've been hoping for 35 years. Then why didn't you ever come back?
Rosa's eyes filled with tears.
Because I was afraid. Afraid that you'd hate me, afraid that I'd destroyed any chance of being part of your life.
Why did you leave? She was quiet for a long moment, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. I was 19, Elena. I had dreams of traveling, of seeing the world. When I got pregnant, everyone expected me to give up those dreams, to be happy with a life I'd never chosen. So you chose your dreams over your child. I chose what I thought was best for you. Her voice broke. I saw how young your father and I were, how unprepared. I saw the fights we were already having about money and the future. I was terrified I'd end up resenting you, resenting the life I'd given up. I thought about my own life, my decision to stay in Moonrise Bay, when I could have pursued my art in larger cities. Did you regret it? Every single day. Rosa wiped her eyes. I spent 35 years trying to convince myself I'd made the right choice. I traveled, I taught art to children in 12 different countries. I lived the life I'd dreamed of, but none of it filled the space you left in my heart. Why come back now? Because I'm dying. The words hit me like a rogue wave. What? Pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less. Rosa's voice was matter-of-fact, but I could see the fear in her eyes. I realized I couldn't die without trying to make things right, without letting you know how much I've always loved you. I stared at this woman who'd given me life, who'd shaped my future by leaving it. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know that leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever done, and that not a day has passed when I haven't wondered who you became. A flashback hit me suddenly, vivid and unexpected. I was 6 months old, lying in a crib, watching mobile figures dance above my head. A woman's voice was singing a Spanish lullaby, soft and sweet. Hands were touching my face, and I could smell jasmine perfume. You sang to me, I whispered. Rosa's face crumpled. You remember? I always thought it was Mom, Sophia, but it was you. I used to sing you to sleep every night, Estrelita, about the little star. I couldn't leave without singing it to you one last time, ... Tears streamed down my face. All these years, I'd carried a piece of her with me without knowing it. The lullaby I hummed when I painted, the melody that came to me in moments of stress, it was my birth mother's voice, embedded in my earliest memories. I have so many questions, I said. I have time, Rosa replied. However much time we have. We sat on that porch for hours, sharing stories like women who'd known each other forever. She told me about the countries she'd visited, the art she'd created, the children she'd taught. I told her about growing up in Moonrise Bay, about Sophia's love and David's protection, about my own art and the man I was falling in love with. Marcus sounds wonderful, she said when I described him. Does he make you happy? He makes me feel safe, like I don't have to be anyone other than who I am. That's precious. Don't take it for granted. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, I realized I'd been holding my breath for 35 years. Meeting Rosa didn't give me the answers I'd expected. Instead, it gave me permission to stop asking certain questions. I should go, I said finally. I need to check on Mom. How is Sophia? Rosa's voice was gentle. I know she raised you. I know she loved you as her own. She's sick. Dementia. She's forgetting things. I'm sorry. She was a good woman. She gave you the stability I couldn't. I stood to leave, then turned back. Rosa, would you like to meet her? I think she'd want to see you. I'd like that, if she's willing. I drove home through the gathering darkness, my mind spinning with everything I'd learned. Rosa wasn't the selfish woman I'd imagined. She was complicated, flawed, human. She'd made choices that had rippled through decades, affecting everyone she'd touched. But she was also my mother, the woman who'd given me life, who'd shared her artistic soul with me, who'd loved me enough to let me go. I found Mom in the living room,
sitting in Dad's chair, holding a photograph of the three of us from my high school graduation. She looked up when I entered, and for a moment her eyes were clear.
Elena, I've been thinking about your father today. He would have been so proud of your art show.
Mom, there's something I need to tell you. About Rosa. Her expression shifted, becoming guarded. What about her? She's here, in Moonrise Bay. She wants to see you. Mom was quiet for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. I wondered when she'd come back.
You're not angry.
I was. For years, I was furious with her. But anger is exhausting, Mija, and I have more important things to do with whatever time I have left. I knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in mine. She's sick, Mom. She's dying.
Then we'd better not waste any time. The truth was worse than I imagined. The truth was that love wasn't simple. It wasn't the fairy tale I'd believed in as a child, where good mothers stayed and bad ones left. It was messy and complicated, filled with impossible choices and lasting consequences. I arranged for Rosa to visit the next afternoon when Mom's energy was usually at its peak. I spent the morning cleaning the house, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe I needed the familiar ritual of making everything perfect the way Mom had taught me when I was small. Marcus arrived as I was putting fresh flowers in the living room. He took one look at my face and pulled me into his arms. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice gentle against my hair. "I don't know. I feel like I'm meeting both my mothers for the first time." He held me tighter. "You don't have to do this alone." "I know, but I think I need to." When Rosa arrived, she stood on the porch for a long moment before knocking. Through the window, I could see her gathering courage, smoothing her skirt, touching her hair. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman about to face the consequences of choices made 35 years ago. Mom answered the door herself, and the two women stared at each other across the threshold. Rosa was still beautiful, but worn by time and travel. Mom was frailer than I'd realized, her silver hair thin and her hands trembling slightly. "Sophia," Rosa said softly. "Rosa," Mom's voice was steady, "you look exactly the same." We both know that's not true. Mom stepped aside, gesturing for Rosa to enter. "Come in, we have a lot to talk about." I watched from the kitchen as they sat in the living room, these two women who'd shared my father's love in different ways. The conversation was stilted at first, filled with the awkwardness of strangers who'd once been connected by circumstances beyond their control. "She's beautiful," Rosa said, glancing toward the kitchen where I was pretending to make tea. "You raised her well." "We raised her well," Mom corrected. "She has your artistic eye, your passion for color, but your steadiness, your loyalty." A flashback hit me as I listened to them talk. I was 12. Crying in my room because Sarah Henderson had told everyone at school that my painting was weird. Mom had found me there, had sat on my bed and told me that art wasn't about pleasing everyone. It was about being honest about what you saw in the world. "She gets that from you," Mom had said. "That ability to see beauty where others see ordinary." I'd never questioned where that ability came from. Now I realized it was a gift from both my mothers, the passion from Rosa, the permission to express it from Sophia. "Why did you really leave?" Mom asked Rosa, her voice gentle but direct. Rosa was quiet for a long moment. "Because I was afraid I'd ruin her life the way I'd ruined mine." "You were 19. You hadn't ruined anything yet." I felt like I had. Roberto and I were so young, so unprepared. We were fighting about everything, money, the future, whether we should get married. I was terrified I'd end up hating him, hating the life we'd built, hating her. Another flashback surfaced. I was 16, fighting with Mom about curfew. I'd screamed that I hated her, that I couldn't wait to leave Moonrise Bay forever. She just smiled sadly and said, "I know you don't mean that, but even if you did, it wouldn't change how much I love you." "I never hated you," I said, entering the living room with the tea tray. "Even when I was angry, I never hated you." "I didn't destroy you, toxin." Both women looked at me, and I saw my own eyes reflected in both their faces. "I know," Mom said. "Just like I knew Rosa didn't hate you when she left." "I loved her so much it felt like dying," Rosa whispered. "I thought I was choosing her happiness over my own.
I thought she'd be better off without a mother who might resent her.
She was better off with both of us, Mom said firmly. With the mother who gave her life and the mother who gave her roots.
I sat between them on the couch, feeling the weight of their combined love. I need to tell you both something. About Dad. They looked at me expectantly. He never stopped painting you, I said to Rosa. His studio was full of portraits. He never stopped loving you. Rosa's face crumpled. I hoped he'd forget me. I hoped he'd be completely happy with Sophia.
He was happy, Mom said quietly. But happiness doesn't mean forgetting. He loved us both, in different ways.
Now, how did you live with that? Rosa asked. The same way you lived with leaving, one day at a time, making the best choices I could. As the afternoon wore on, I watched these two women who'd shaped my life find their way to understanding. They weren't enemies or rivals. They were two people who'd loved the same man, who'd both sacrificed for the same child, who'd both made choices that had rippled through decades. I have something for you, Rosa said eventually, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a small wrapped package.
I painted this for you when you were a baby. I was going to give it to you for your first birthday, but...
I unwrapped the package carefully. Inside was a miniature canvas, no bigger than my palm. It showed a woman and a baby under a star-filled sky, both figures painted with infinite tenderness. It's us, I breathed. It's us the way I wanted to remember us, the way I carried you in my heart all these years. I looked at the painting, seeing not just the artistic skill but the love that had guided every brushstroke. It's beautiful. I want you to have it, along with this. She handed me a thick envelope. It's letters, one for every birthday I missed, every Christmas, every milestone. I wrote them all, even though I never sent them.
My hands shook as I held the envelope. 35 years of letters from a mother who'd never stopped being my mother, even from a distance.
Rosa, Mom said suddenly, I need to tell you something, too.
We both looked at her. The letters Roberto wrote to you. After you left, I kept them.
Rosa's eyes widened. He wrote to me? For years, he'd write them and leave them on his desk, then throw them away. I kept them.
Mom's voice was barely above a whisper. I thought someday you might want to know what he wanted to say.
She disappeared into the bedroom, returning with a shoebox I'd seen countless times but never questioned. Inside were dozens of letters, all addressed to Rosa Martinez in Dad's careful handwriting. He never stopped loving you, Mom said simply. But he loved Elena more. He stayed for her. Rosa took the box with trembling hands. He stayed for her, but he painted me. He painted you because you were part of his soul, but he lived for us because we were part of his heart. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the living room, I realized that this was what family looked like. Not the neat categories I'd imagined, but the messy reality of people who'd loved each other imperfectly, who'd made mistakes and found ways to forgive. I'm glad I came back, Rosa said. I'm glad I got to meet the woman who raised my daughter. I'm glad you came back too, Mom replied. Elena needed to know all of herself. That evening, after Rosa had returned to her hotel, I sat with Mom in the garden. The roses Dad had planted were in full bloom, their fragrance mixing with the salt air from the ocean. Are you okay? I asked. I'm tired, she said. But I'm at peace. I always worried that Rosa would come back and you'd choose her over me. But I understand now that love isn't about choosing. It's about accepting all the different ways people can matter to you. I love you, Mom. Sophia, you'll always be my mother. And I love you, Mija. No matter what happens with my mind, that will never change. I thought about the painting I'd started the night before, the woman holding the baby. I realize now that it wasn't just about Rosa and me. It was about the circle of love that had surrounded me my entire life. Birth mother and adoptive mother, father and brother, friends and lovers. All the people who'd helped create the woman I'd become. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. How did it go? I typed back. I'll tell you everything tomorrow, but Marcus, I love you. His response came immediately. I love you too. Ready for whatever comes next. I smiled. thinking about the gallery opening next week, about the paintings I'd created that told the story of my life in Moonrise Bay, the story I'd thought I knew completely, until I learned that the most important stories are the ones we're still writing. A month later, I stood in Marcus's gallery, surrounded by my paintings and the people who'd shaped my life. Mom was there, elegant in a blue dress that matched her eyes. David had flown in from San Francisco, looking uncomfortable but proud. Carmen had brought her new boyfriend, a kind man who made her laugh. And Rosa was there too, frailer than she'd been a month ago, but radiant with joy. She decided to spend her remaining time in Moonrise Bay, renting a small cottage near the harbor where she could paint and watch the ocean. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus said, raising his glass of champagne, "I'd like to introduce you to Elena Vasquez, whose work explores the complex beauty of family, memory, and home." As I looked around the room at the faces of everyone I loved, I felt something shift inside me. For 35 years, I'd been searching for myself in mirrors and memories, in the familiar landscapes of my hometown and the unknown territories of my dreams. But I realize now that identity wasn't something you found, it was something you created, one choice at a time, one relationship at a time, one brushstroke at a time. "Thank you," I said, my voice carrying across the gallery. "These paintings are about the stories that shape us, the ones we know and the ones we discover, the ones we inherit and the ones we choose to tell." I caught Marcus's eye across the room. He smiled, and I saw our future reflected in his expression.
Not perfect, but real. Not simple, but worth fighting for.
"But mostly," I continued, "they're about love. The love that stays and the love that leaves, the love that forgives and the love that remembers, the love that makes us who we are." Rosa approached one of my paintings, the woman holding the baby under the star-filled sky. It was my interpretation of her miniature canvas, enlarged and reimagined through the lens of everything I'd learned about love and loss and the complicated courage it takes to be a mother. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "You've made something new from something old." "Isn't that what we all do?" I replied. "Take the pieces of ourselves and create something that's uniquely ours?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so proud of the woman you've become. Both of your mothers are." As the evening wound down, I found myself standing on the gallery's balcony, looking out over Moonrise Bay. The harbor lights twinkled like stars, and the ocean stretched endlessly toward the horizon. This town had been my whole world for 35 years, and I'd often wondered if I was limiting myself by staying. But now I understood that home wasn't a limitation, it was a foundation. A place to return to, a place to build from, a place to love from. "Penny for your thoughts?" Marcus joined me on the balcony, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "I was thinking about choices," I said, leaning back against his chest. "About how we become who we are." "And who are you, Elena Vasquez?" I thought about it for a moment. I'm the daughter of 2 mothers and 1 father. I'm the sister of a brother who protects me even when I don't want to be protected. I'm the friend of a woman who sees the best in everyone. I'm the student of a town that taught me the value of roots and the beauty of staying. I turned in his arms. "And I'm the woman who's falling in love with a man who sees me completely." "Just falling?" he asked, his eyes twinkling. "Fine. The woman who's fallen completely, hopelessly, eternally in love with you." He kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When we broke apart, I saw the question in his eyes. "Marcus, there's something I need to tell you. About my plans." "What about them?" "I want to open an art therapy center here in Moonrise Bay. I want to help other people find their stories through painting. And I want to document the town's history, the stories of all the families who've made this place home." "That sounds wonderful." "It also means I'm staying. Definitely, permanently staying. I know you have dreams beyond this place, and I'd understand if—" Elena. He cupped my face in his hands. "I don't have dreams beyond this place. I have dreams that include this place, that include you, that include us building something beautiful together." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. I've been sure since the first day you walked into my gallery, covered in paint and talking about the way light changes throughout the day. I've been sure since you cried looking at that seascape in my back room. I've been sure since you let me hold you when your father died. I felt tears streaming down my face, but they weren't sad tears. They were tears of recognition, of coming home to myself.
I love you, I whispered.
I love you too. All of you. The part that's Rosa's, and the part that's Sophia's, and the part that's completely, uniquely yours. 6 months later, I stood in the cottage Rosa had rented, helping her pack her few belongings. The cancer had progressed faster than expected, but she'd filled her final months with painting and laughter and the kind of deep conversations that come when you know time is precious. I have something for you, she said, handing me a canvas wrapped in brown paper. It's my last painting. I unwrapped it carefully, gasping when I saw what she'd created. It was a portrait of me, but not just me. It was me with Sophia, both of us standing in Mom's garden, surrounded by the roses Dad had planted. We were both smiling, both radiant with love. It's called Elena's Mothers, Rosa said. I wanted to capture the truth of who you are, the daughter of 2 women who loved you enough to give you everything they had.
It's perfect, I breathed.
I want you to hang it in your art therapy center. I want other people to see that families come in all shapes and sizes, that love is bigger than biology, that sometimes the most beautiful things come from the most complicated circumstances. I will, I promise. Rosa took my hands in hers. Elena, I need you to know something. Leaving you was the worst mistake of my life. But if making that mistake led to you being raised by Sophia, led to you becoming the woman you are today, then maybe it wasn't entirely a mistake. Maybe it was just part of your story.
Maybe it was part of all our stories, I said.
She smiled, and I saw myself in her expression, not just the physical resemblance, but the artist's eye, the way she saw beauty in complexity. Take care of Sophia for me, she said, and take care of yourself. Love Marcus with your whole heart. Create art that matters. Be happy, Elena. Be gloriously, messily, completely happy. Please stop. Rosa died 2 weeks later, peacefully in her sleep, with the sound of the ocean outside her window. We buried her in Moonrise Bay's hillside cemetery, next to Dad's grave. Sophia insisted on it. She was part of our family, Mom said simply. She belongs here. At the funeral, I read from one of the letters she'd written to me over the years, the one from my 21st birthday. My dearest Elena, today you become a woman, and I hope you know how proud I am of the person you're becoming. I may not be there to see it, but I carry you with me always. You are my heart walking around in the world. Now, a year later, I stand in the Elena Vasquez Art Therapy Center, named for both my mothers, watching children discover the magic of color and creation. The walls are covered with their artwork, paintings of families and dreams, of fears and hopes, of the complicated beauty of being human. Sophia sits in the corner, her memory more fragmented now, but her love undimmed. She still recognizes me most days, still calls me Mija, still tells me I'm beautiful when I'm covered in paint. Marcus and I are planning our wedding for next spring, in Mom's garden, surrounded by the roses that have bloomed through decades of love and loss. David is going to walk me down the aisle, and Carmen will be my maid of honor. Rosa's cottage will become our first home as a married couple. I've learned that the most important stories aren't the ones with neat endings. They're the ones that continue, that grow and change and surprise us. They're the ones that teach us that love isn't simple or easy, but it's worth everything we have to give. As I lock up the center and head home, I think about the painting I'm working on now. A self-portrait, but not just of me. It's of all the women who've shaped me, all the choices that led me here, all the love that's made me who I am. The sun is setting over Moonrise Bay, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. I take a deep breath, tasting salt and possibilities on the air. Tomorrow, Marcus and I will choose paint colors for our new home. Tomorrow, I'll help Mom tend her roses. Tomorrow, I'll teach children to see the world through artistic eyes. But tonight, I'm simply Elena, daughter, sister, friend, lover, artist, teacher, woman. I'm the sum of all my mother's dreams and my own choices. I'm the story that's still being written, the painting that's still in progress, the love that's still growing. I stepped into a new beginning, carrying all my endings with me.
Thanks for joining me on this heartfelt journey. Don't forget to subscribe and like for more stories that touch the soul.